Hey, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the Writer's Bookshelf series. If you're new to this channel or if you're new to the series, what we're doing with Writer's Bookshelf is we're actually going through my bookshelf. I'm a writer and we're looking at some of my titles that I have that I found beneficial to understanding how to write better and become a better author and all that. And the advantage of this, or the importance of it rather, is that when you go take a college class, you are learning essential information, but it's kind of scattered. It's like, eating potato chips when you're hungry. You're going to get enough to do the job, but you're not getting enough out of it to really have a satisfying career, because there's not enough time to really focus on all of the essentials that you need in order to do this well. If you take writing seriously like you would any profession or any job, you're going to have to put the time into it and the training and the understanding. It's not just a matter of sitting down and think, hey, you know what, I should write a novel today. I think I'll do that. It's not that simple. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of understanding, a lot of knowing how to get to the end without getting stuck, things like that. And certainly nothing that you would ever want to be intimidated from doing, because it's worth it. If you can get to the end, that's you deserve some kind of coffee, or if you like something a little harder than coffee, it's fine. But there's a satisfaction in finishing the work, but you also want to know that you've done the work well. And finishing is not just a matter of getting to the end, because if you're just writing a bunch of random scenes over and over and over, that's not really getting to the end. That's just getting to the end of a mess. It's like breaking down in the middle of a junkyard and finding the exit, but realizing, well, you still have to walk home. Not a big victory there. The idea is you got to have a plan for actually getting to where you want to go. And as a writer, you want to both enjoy your own work, but you also want readers to enjoy your work too, should you choose to share it with them. So the series is all about learning how to improve your writing, and through the use of resources. And so if you've not caught up so far, go ahead and check back those older videos and just get a feel for what this is. And I want to emphasize that I'm not telling you like all the contents of a book per se. I'm explaining why you should read it. So if you're looking to get the notes for the book in this video, you're not going to get that. What you're going to get is you're going to get an overview of what it covers so that you can understand why it's important. And then it's also kind of a training guide for you to just say, hey, what should I read this week? Oh, I know, I'll read Story Genius by Lisa Cron. And so here we are. Now we're at the official beginning here. And the reason why I've chosen this book for our 8th installment is because this book, it's all about creating those compelling characters and situations that draw the reader's empathy, but it also goes one step further and covers the logic of how characters think, why they come up with the decisions that they do. In other words, this is the book you want to read if you want to figure out how to avoid the plot holes that are inevitable in every draft. And so the punchline is, how to use brain science to go beyond outlining and write a riveting novel. That's the thesis of the book. It's every writer's greatest fear, pouring blood, sweat, and tears into writing hundreds of pages only to realize the story has no sense of urgency and no internal logic, so it's a complete do-over. The prevailing wisdom in the writing community is that there are just two ways around the problem: pantsing or winging it, and plotting, focusing on the external plot. Story coach Lisa Cron has spent decades discovering why these methods rarely work and coming up with a powerful alternative based on the science of what our brains are wired to crave in every story we read, and it's not what you think. Camera's up there. In this revolutionary guide, Cron helps you crack the story code and create a novel, screenplay, or memoir that will keep readers riveted. Using one novelist's evolving story as an example throughout, Story Genius takes you step by step from the first glimmer of an idea to an expansive, multi-layered cause and effect blueprint, including fully realized scenes. By plumbing the nitty-gritty details of your raw idea to organically generate your story's internal logic, meaning, and urgency, you'll end up with a first draft that has the authority, richness, and command of a 6th or a 7th. In other words, get rid of those dang plot holes and make that character have something of substance that makes you not only identify with them, but want to keep on going. So this is what this does is this also covers a lot of the writer's questions, like when you're writing your draft and you come to a scene where you're not sure what more to do with it. You're not sure if you should just wrap it up and keep going or what. This book will also, in a way, kind of help you through those problems. One thing I like about this particular book over all the others is it follows the same student example where it's one of her students or one of the writers that she's coaching gives her an example of this story that she's writing about a woman who adopts a dog, and she adopts the dog because she needs something. It's kind of like a John Wick story where she just needs something to love, but although the dog, from my understanding, doesn't die. If you haven't seen John Wick, spoiler alert, sorry, it's not a big spoiler, it's the plot of the movie. Dog dies, there you go, he goes on a revenge streak. Now you know. John Wick. It's the whole entire franchise is about bad guys killing his dog and he goes on a revenge spree. Hopefully that didn't spoil anything for you. But anyway, the character in the example story also has a dog, but that dog causes her some trouble. We find out that the dog is actually like a famous dog, and there's all this stuff that happens. And so the book is sort of like two parts. It's it's a book that teaches you how to write compelling characters and characters with reasons and motivations and things like that, but also how to identify those parts where a plot hole may damage the integrity of the character. Where having a backstory, you may not include the backstory in the book, but having a backstory for your own knowledge that you can use as your base, how that enforces the character's motivation. These are some of the tips that it brings into play and shows you how to do it well so that you have a solid foundation. And what it does is it uses the example of this writing student's story to basically evolve from this not horribly written, I wouldn't say it's horribly written, it's not bad, but this problematic beginning and problematic structure, we watch it evolve into something that's actually pretty compelling and something like, dang, I wish that were a real book. And I looked it up. I don't think it's a real book. I think it's something that, but I kind of wanted to read it. And this is again based on the example that she gives us. It's a powerful way of looking at development of story. The characters, plot, all that. The fact that their example is something now I want to read because it's interesting. I think it goes to to the heart of how effective the book is, and I want to reiterate something I didn't mention. Is these videos tend to go all over the place, but Lisa Cron, this is not her first book. She's got one called Wired for Story, which I have not read and is not on my bookshelf, so I can't cover that yet. But I know that that's also a pretty popular book among indie authors in particular. I would say if you want to cheat and get that one before you get this one, that's cool. And then make sure you leave me a comment on what you think of Wired for Story. But she really is a strong writing coach, in my opinion. I think she knows her stuff. And, I'm jumping the gun a little bit on getting away from the more trendy structured books that I want to cover probably starting next week to come here first, because this is, I think, more applicable in the modern era. And I think you're really going to get a lot of useful information out of this about how to tap into your reader psychology when coming up with characters, and again, how to write a book that has its questions answered, that still has all the elements in place. There's one in particular I still think about now called The Ticking Clock, where it talks about how you can employ a ticking clock to your advantage in creating the conflict. It's just little things like that. It's useful, and this gets my official recommendation for your next book on the list. If you are in fact taking these books seriously, this should be your next book, because it is part structure, but it's also part reader empathy. It's part plugging the holes. And again, if you want a sample of what's in the book, sorry. So the table of contents is pretty straightforward. It's what his story is and what it isn't, creating the inside of the story, One example of a chapter is the what if, expectation broken. The why exactly does your protagonist care? What next, the beauty of cause and effect. As you can see, there's elements in here that are essential to telling a good, compelling story. And each chapter does focus on one element that you can use to further on. Now, if you've read last week's recommendation, Hooked by Les Edgerton, you're going to find that this is probably a good way to keep on going, because this is going to remind you there's more than an opening. Like, there's the rest of the story, and to have a place to go forward is useful. But what this does too is it challenges you on recognizing what each piece should be. So by the time you get to part 3, creating an external gauntlet to spur your protagonist's internal struggle, the chapter titles include the opening, of your novel and of the Story Genius Blueprint System, which, again, it's the opening. We talked about that already. But you have chapter 10, the real aha moment. Where will your story end? So that's interesting, because stories don't end just anywhere. They end in a particular place that's thematic, that's based on the character's motivation. If you look at, again, Lord of the Rings, where does Lord of the Rings end? Well, it ends in a lot of places. But, thematically, if you look at it from the hero's journey, thematically it ends when Frodo gets on the boat. We know that he threw the ring in, but it wasn't about the ring. It was about Frodo, and really the hobbits growing, becoming heroes. It's about, the king taking his right on the throne. It's about the characters, basically owning up to their destinies, taking each one their own hero's journey. That's actually going to, segue into our next book next week, but so keep that in mind. But you got to know where your story ends, and so the point here is it ends on the theme more than it ends on the plot. So that's something to consider. Building your blueprint, how to keep track of all the moving parts, that again plugs the holes. Going back to move forward, how to harvest the past to set up the plot, that's your backstory. Story logic, making sure each what has a why. So this goes back to something that we teach in college, where you have every essay you write, every letter to grandma, every grocery list has to have a purpose. It has to have, you're not writing words down because it's fun. You're writing words down because there's something to say. There's something you have to have, something you have to communicate and share. And so, that chapter on, every what has a why, well, that's what that's about. It's going into why this matters, and so it goes through those tips of helping you remember the why, bringing in the why, making it impactful. So by now, I hope you've discovered a theme in my book selection here. It's about getting you onto this development path of going from not having a clue to having a clue. When we go on to season 2, I think we're going to get more into like the details on how to make it strong. But this season's really about just getting something done that's worth it. And I definitely think that this is a good one to have on your bookshelf. And I'm going to probably recommend Wired for Story also, even though we're not going to cover that this time around, because A, again, I don't have it. B, I haven't read it. But I will, because it's on my list of things I'm going to read at some point. But I think she knows her stuff, and I think she's worth learning from. So if you have the time this week, go ahead and pick up Story Genius by Lisa Cron. Again, looks like this. I think you can still get this one in the bookstore. I think it's not a new book, but it's one that I think they keep stocked, so you should be able to find it. So check it out if you haven't already. And then just always remember the little asterisks in here. Before you waste 3 years writing 327 pages that go nowhere, read the book. Okay. Anyway, thanks for watching, and make sure you leave me a comment if you have read the book and you have opinions on it. Tell us what you think about it. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, do all the things that YouTubers tell you to do, and brush your teeth, because they don't tell you to do that, but they should. It's important. And have a good week, and we'll see you next Friday at 10 or whenever you get done with work. All right. Time for coffee. Bye.